Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to go over news that Labyrinth 2 is apparently moving forward, and they have attached a director to it finally, who is Scott Derrickson, which is very interesting considering that Derrickson I don't think he had confirmed necessarily what his next project was going to be. But the thing is that we knew that he was getting offers from a lot of people. He had gotten offers. He had stated that he had gotten offers from Blumhouse to go direct some horror movies over there, or presumably horror movies. We didn't know necessarily what studio he was going to go to, but apparently he's drifting toward this. Now, to give you a little backstory, the original Labyrinth came out in 1986. It had David Bowie in it, who played the Goblin King. I believe the girl was Jennifer Connelly, if I remember correctly. Basically, it was this huge puppet, fest movie. It was amazing special effects, great Henson Company, physical effects. It was kind of like, one of those movies that was kind of among the same vein as The Dark Crystal, which I believe was also done by the Henson Company. Which actually just got a Netflix revival very recently, which I think was relatively positively received. Going from that, basically, I think when that came out, although I think Labyrinth 2 might have been in discussions before that, and maybe in the development before that, but I feel like when Netflix did Dark Crystal and got, kind of the Henson juices flowing again, I think that kind of probably springboarded this project maybe a little bit further towards the front of the line for the company that's making it. But the thing is that you run into a few different problems with this movie. Now, the good thing is that you did get Derrickson. Now, Derrickson is a relatively good director. I like a decent amount of his work. I thought that Doctor Strange was a really good Marvel film. It was actually probably one of the better ones that came out in that time frame. And it was kind of a nice little departure to have kind of an origin story again and a new hero to follow, and it wasn't a bunch of stuff getting kind of chucked in there over the course. I think they had one little reference at the beginning of the movie to War Machine, but other than that, they didn't really have too much. So now that we've kind of moved past what he is capable of as a director, because I think that's pretty well covered for this. I think that he knows how to do a pretty good effects film. I think he can manage that. But moving down to the actors and actresses, now nobody has been signed for the film as of yet, at least not that I know of. I think they're in the process, since they just hired Derrickson, I'm assuming they're going to be in the process of retooling and finalizing the script, and during that time probably doing the casting as well. So the problem is that David Bowie is very much dead. So you're not getting him back to play the Goblin King. So you've lost one of the big major draws of the original Labyrinth, which was kind of this flamboyant and insane role that was done by David Bowie. And also at the time, Bowie was kind of at the top of his career. I think it was 1986, roughly. He because of that, he was really big in this movie. It's kind of like, Michael Jordan in Space Jam. Like, nobody else could have been in that film at that time because it was the Michael Jordan show in the NBA. I don't say that David Bowie was the show in the 80s in terms of, like, there wasn't anybody else. But he was a really big name, especially around that time period. So it made sense to get him. Now, the question is whether they replace David Bowie or whether they write him out of the story. Now, it's been a while since I've seen the original Labyrinth. I'm fairly certain he does not die in the film. Or even if he did, they could possibly bring him back or do something else. But I'm fairly certain he doesn't die, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I'm sure people will be correcting me in the comments below if I'm wrong. But the thing is that you're never going to be able to kind of recapture that because obviously he's no longer living. So, like I said, that's one of your major draws from the original film that I felt made it very much a better film, from what I recall of it. And the other thing is you have the Henson effects. Now, you're going to get those back because the Henson Company under Jim Henson's son, I can't remember the exact name, but the company is the Jim Henson Company. but they're going to come in and they're going to do their usual Muppet style effects for this. They're probably going to dig out a bunch of old puppets or recreate them from the original films, which makes sense. But I don't know what they would do in terms of maybe they'll follow an older Jennifer Connelly if they maybe can get her back to reprise her role and maybe just be an older version and maybe have something to do there where there's another child in danger, maybe her child or somebody else's, and she has to go back into the labyrinth or something like that. I could see that being a plot line they would go with this, but change up the story once you get in there and do something different. But you do have the Henson Company puppets, so that's a big plus for this film, and I know the Henson Company has been pushing for this for a number of years, because now that they've kind of gone into a little bit of a resurgence in recent years because you had the Muppets return to television, even though that was very brief, and I don't know if they're getting a season 2 of that. And then you also had some of the Muppet films that came out, the Happy Time Murders, which was one that basically they had to fight a lot to get made. But I actually don't mind that film. I find that film pretty funny. Mostly just because I like horrible gratuitous humor. But after that, now we're kind of in the next phase where what are they going to do? And like I said, we also had the Dark Crystal too, which I believe the Henson Company also worked on. It was their property, so I would assume that they worked on it. But moving forward from that, now you have this, so we're going back to Labyrinth. Now, the other problem that I kind of have with this is when you make a sequel to a cult film many years after the original was made, a lot of times people don't really, I shouldn't say people, but maybe Hollywood people don't necessarily understand it's a cult film, or it's it's an underground film, or it's a fan favorite or whatever, and like you may have a rabid fan base, but you also have to understand how much you're going to be putting into this. So it's kind of a financial question too, because the original Labyrinth did not really make money. It lost a decent amount of money, I think, if I remember correctly. So it's not a film that necessarily warranted a sequel at the time, which is why none were made, and then the Henson Company moved on to other projects. But now that we've kind of come full circle and everybody has to dredge up 80s nostalgia, now we're going back to Labyrinth. And again, this has been in discussion for a number of years already. And I believe they also have a couple of scripts that have already been written, which are, again, I'm sure are going to be retooled by Derrickson and whoever else is on that creative team. But it's an interesting little tidbit of news. It makes me a little optimistic for the film. They also have confirmed this is not early on, I guess they were saying it was a reboot, or somebody said it was a reboot, and that kind of went around the internet, but it was clarified afterwards this is actually going to be a sequel to the original Labyrinth, and not a full-on reboot. But I assume that they'll probably do some kind of a soft reboot element. They'll make it so that, okay, it's kind of a passing the torch kind of thing. God, all I can think about is Space Jam 2 now, because I'm thinking about this movie and I compared David Bowie to Michael Jordan. But maybe I'll do a rant video on Space Jam 2 maybe another time for shits and giggles whenever that comes out. But I want to know what you think. Do you think it's a good idea to go forward with Labyrinth 2? Do you not think it's a good idea? Do you like the fact they got Scott Derrickson to come in and do the directing? I want to know what you think. Put your thoughts in the comments below. As usual, I like to read them. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?